The roses bloomed red as old blood in the only garden in Thornwatch where nothing sharp was grown, and the man who tended them had killed more enemies than anyone else in the village could count. Owen Talmadge knelt in the dirt every morning before the sun fully crested the eastern hills, his scarred hands gentle around stems that bore thorns he never seemed to feel. The other yards in Thornwatch sprouted practice dummies, archery targets, sparring circles worn bare by boots. Children learned to hold swords before they learned their letters. Veterans trained recruits in formations that had held back 3 different invasions. But Owen's plot, a quarter-acre beside his modest stone cottage, grew only roses. Crimson blooms nodded in the wind. Their perfume drifted across the packed earth of the training grounds, sweet and incongruous. People talked, of course. Thornwatch was a border village, close enough to the contested lands that everyone who lived there knew how to fight. Most had fought. Owen Talmadge had been a captain once, decorated 3 times, bearer of a scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. He had retired 5 years ago at 32, taken the cottage his parents had left him and started planting. First 1 bush, then 2, then a dozen. Now they filled every inch of his land in neat rows, each one labeled with a wooden stake driven into the ground, though no one could read what he had carved into the wood from the road. The village tolerated it because he had earned that tolerance in blood. But they did not understand it, and what people do not understand, they eventually resent. Grenna Crag understood roses even less than the humans did, but she understood obsession, and she recognized it in the way the scarred man moved among his flowers. She was newer to Thornwatch than most, having arrived 8 months ago from one of the orc settlements further south. She worked as a blacksmith's assistant, her green hands strong enough to swing a hammer all day and steady enough for detail work. Her tusks were small, barely visible when her mouth was closed, and her dark hair hung in a practical braid down her back. She stood 5 feet and 8 inches tall, athletic and lean, with the kind of build that came from labor rather than leisure. The blacksmith, an old woman named Marta, had hired her because she needed the help and because Grenna did not flinch at heat or sparks. The humans of Thornwatch mostly left Grenna alone, some out of lingering prejudice, some out of simple disinterest. She preferred it that way. She rented a room above the smithy, worked her hours, bought her supplies, and kept to herself. But she noticed things, the way someone who has always been watched learns to watch in return. She noticed Owen Talmadge, not because he was handsome, though he was, in a weathered sort of way. Not because he was famous, though his reputation preceded him. She noticed him because every market day he brought roses, bundles of them, wrapped in cloth, tied with twine. He sold them from a small cart in the square, and almost no one bought them. Thornwatch had no use for roses. Warriors did not decorate their tables with flowers. There were no festivals that called for bouquets. No tradition of courtship gifts. The few people who did buy from him seemed to do so out of pity or old loyalty, and he accepted their coins with a polite nod that never reached his eyes. Grenna watched this for 3 market days in a row. On the 4th, she walked up to his cart. Owen looked up from arranging a bundle. His eyes were gray, the color of winter sky. He did not smile, but he did not frown either. He simply waited. "How many do you have?" Grenna asked. "Today." 43 bundles, 5 stems each. I will buy them all." His expression did not change, but something flickered in his gaze. Surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. "That is a lot of roses. I have the coin." "What will you do with 215 roses?" Grenna met his eyes steadily. Her own were amber, bright against her green skin. "That is my concern." For a long moment he studied her, then he named his price. It was not cheap, but it was fair. Grenna counted out the silver and copper, and he began loading the bundles into the canvas sack she had brought. His hands moved with care. Not a petal bruised. "They will wilt in 3 days," he said as he handed her the last bundle. "Maybe 4 if you keep them in water, I know." "Do you?" The question held no mockery. It was genuine, as if he truly wanted to know whether she understood what she had bought. Grenna slung the sack over her shoulder. The weight was substantial but manageable. "I know that you spend more time growing these than anyone in this village spends on anything that is not a weapon," she said. "I know that you could plant grain or vegetables or anything useful and you choose roses instead. I want to know why." Owen's scarred face remained unreadable. "They are beautiful. So are sunsets. You do not sell those." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Sunsets do not need tending. Neither do target dummies once they are built, yet you tend roses. Perhaps I like the work." Grenna shifted the sack on her shoulder. "Perhaps, or perhaps there is another reason." She left before he could respond. She felt his gaze on her back all the way across the square. That night, she filled every container in her small room with water and divided the roses among them. Jars, cups, bowls, even her washing basin. The scent filled the space, almost overwhelming. She sat on her bed and looked at them, all that red, and wondered what kind of man grew flowers in a village that only valued steel. The next market day, she bought his entire stock again. This time, Owen did not ask what she would do with them. He simply loaded them into her sack and took her money, but when she turned to leave, he spoke. "You are wasting your coin." Grenna glanced back. "It is mine to waste. You could buy better things, warmer clothes for winter, better tools. I have what I need. Do you?" He tilted his head slightly. The scar on his face caught the morning light. "Or are you trying to make a point? Maybe I am trying to understand one." She left again, and again she felt him watching. The blacksmith, Marta, noticed the roses when Grenna arrived at work. The old woman raised an eyebrow but said nothing until midday when they broke for lunch. "You are the one buying out Talmadge every market day," Marta said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Why?" Grenna bit into her bread. She chewed, swallowed. "He interests me." Marta snorted. "Half the unwed women in this village have been interested in Owen Talmadge since he came back from the war. He never noticed any of them. I am not interested in him that way." "Then what way are you interested?" Grenna considered the question. "I want to know what his roses mean." "They are roses. They mean he likes flowers." "No," Grenna shook her head. "There is something else. The way he tends them, the way he looks at them, it is not a hobby, it is something deeper." Marta was quiet for a moment, then she sighed. "Owen Talmadge went to war young. Came back older than he should have been. Lost his whole company in the last battle he fought. He does not talk about it. No one asks. His whole company, 43 men and women. He was the only one who walked away. 43. The same number of bundles he had brought to market." Grenna felt something cold settle in her chest. "The stakes in his garden," she said slowly. "They have names on them. I would not know. No one goes into his garden but him." But Grenna thought she knew. She thought she understood, at least in part, and understanding made her want to know more. The roses in her room wilted. She composted them behind the smithy and waited for the next market day. When it came, she bought every bundle again. And this time, when Owen handed her the last of them, she did not leave immediately. 43 bundles, she said, his hand stilled on the cart. "That is what I brought. The same as last time, the same as the time before. I bring what I can harvest. You bring exactly 43 every time." Owen's gray eyes met hers. For the first time she saw something sharp in them, not anger but a warning. "You should stop buying these." "Why?" "Because you will run out of coin. I have enough. Because you do not need them. Maybe I do. You do not even like roses." His voice was flat. "You buy them, you take them away, and you let them die. If you wanted flowers, you would keep them alive." Grenna set down her sack. The square was busy around them, full of voices and movement, but the space around Owen's cart felt suddenly very quiet. "You are right," she said. "I do not need roses, but I think you need to grow them. And I think there is a reason you grow exactly 43 bushes, and I think there is a reason you will not tell anyone what that reason is." Owen's jaw tightened. "It is not your business." "No, it is not." Grenna picked up her sack again. "But I am going to keep buying them anyway." She walked away before he could respond. Her heart beat faster than it should have. She did not know why she was doing this, not really. It would be easier to let it go, to stop asking questions. But something in the way he moved among those roses, something in the careful way he wrapped each bundle, told her that this mattered, that he mattered. And she had spent so much of her life watching people pretend things did not matter when they did. The pattern continued. Every market day she bought his roses. Every time he loaded them into her sack with the same silent care. The other vendors began to notice. People whispered. The blacksmith gave her long looks but did not ask again. On the 6th market day, Owen was not in the square. Grenna stood beside his empty cart space, uncertain. Another vendor, a woman who sold pottery, leaned over. "Talmadge is sick," she said. "Caught something. He has not been out of his house in 3 days." Grenna thanked her and walked away. She told herself it was not her concern. He was a stranger, mostly. They had barely spoken. But she thought about those roses, rows and rows of them, and she thought about 43 names carved into wood, and she thought about what happened to a garden when no one tended it for 3 days. That evening, after her work was done, she walked to the edge of the village where his cottage stood. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. The roses in his garden glowed like embers. No one answered when she knocked. She tried the door. It was unlocked, as most doors in Thornwatch were. The village was small enough that theft was rare and shame was powerful. Inside, the cottage was dim and spare. A table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner. Owen lay in the bed, his face flushed with fever, his breathing uneven. A bucket beside the bed smelled sour. He had been sick, thoroughly and recently. Grenna stood in the doorway for a moment, weighing her options. Then she sighed and rolled up her sleeves. She had tended sickness before. Everyone who lived through a hard life learned those skills eventually. She built up the fire, heated water, found clean cloth. She washed his face and helped him drink, though he was barely conscious enough to swallow. She emptied the bucket and rinsed it out. She found bread in his cupboard, hard but not moldy, and left it soaking in water so it would be soft enough to eat when he woke. Then she went outside. The garden stretched before her in the fading light. 43 rose bushes, arranged in neat rows. Each one had a stake beside it, and each stake bore a name carved in simple letters. She walked between them slowly, reading Marcus Wren, Eliza Holt, Thomas Brand, Cara Venn, on and on. 43 names, 43 people who had not come home. The roses were thirsty. It had not rained in over a week, and Owen had been too ill to water them. Grenna found his watering can by the well. She filled it and began to work her way down the rows, giving each bush a slow pour at the roots. The work was meditative. The twilight deepened into night, and she lit a lantern to see by. She was halfway through when she heard the cottage door creak open. Owen stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, swaying slightly. His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing? Watering? These are my roses." "Yes." "You have no right." Grenna poured water around the roots of a bush labeled Simon Reach. "You were too sick to do it yourself. They would have suffered. That is not your concern. You keep saying that." She moved to the next bush, Nadia Kern. But I am here and they need water and you are too weak to stop me." Owen took a step forward and staggered. Grenna set down the watering can and crossed to him in 3 strides. She caught his arm before he could fall. "You should be in bed," she said. "You should not be here. Too late." She guided him back inside. He did not fight her, which told her how sick he truly was. She got him back into bed, gave him more water. He drank, then lay back with his eyes closed. "I read the names," Grenna said quietly. Owen's eyes opened. Even fevered, they were sharp. "You had no right." "You are correct, I did not." "Then why?" "Because you would not tell me." She sat down in the chair beside his bed. 43 roses, 43 people, your company." Owen stared at the ceiling. His throat worked. "They died because of my orders. You were their captain." "I led them into a trap. I misread the intelligence. We were supposed to be raiding a supply line. Instead, we walked into a full battalion." His voice was flat, drained of inflection. "I was the only one who survived." Grenna did not speak. She waited. "They gave me a medal," Owen continued. "For bravery, for fighting my way out. But I did not fight my way out. I crawled out after the battle was over, after the enemy had moved on, after everyone I commanded was already dead." His hands clenched in the blanket. "I grew the roses because I did not know what else to do. One for each of them. So they would have something beautiful, so they would not just be names on a monument somewhere. It is a good memorial. It is selfish. They do not need roses, they are dead." "Memorials are not for the dead," Grenna said. "They are for the living." Owen finally looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from fever or grief she could not tell. "Why do you care?" "I do not know," Grenna admitted. "But I do." He studied her for a long moment, then closed his eyes again. "Finish watering them if you are going to. I cannot stop you." "I will." She returned to the garden and completed the work. Each rose bush received its share of water. Each name received a moment of her attention. When she was done, she checked on Owen once more, found him sleeping, and let herself out. She came back the next morning before work. And the morning after that. Owen's fever broke on the 3rd day. By the 4th, he was strong enough to sit up and take broth. By the 5th, he was arguing with her about whether he needed help. "I can manage," he said, watching her stir the pot over his fire. "You are still weak." "I am well enough. You stood up this morning and nearly fainted. I was dizzy. It passed." Grenna ladled broth into a bowl and handed it to him. "Drink." He drank, scowling, but he drank. "You do not have to keep coming here," he said after a while. "I know." "Then why do you?" Grenna sat down across from him. "When I first came to Thornwatch, people avoided me, not cruelly but not kindly either. I was an orc. I was different, I understood that. But Marta hired me anyway, and she did it because she needed help, and she taught me the work, and she did not treat me as if I was something dangerous." She met his eyes. "You tend 43 roses because you need to tend them, because they matter to you. I tend you because I choose to. Because you matter." Owen's expression softened just slightly. "You do not know me. I know enough. I am not good company. I do not talk much. I do not go to festivals or gatherings. Neither do I." A silence stretched between them. It was not uncomfortable. "Thank you," Owen said finally. "For the roses, for the help." Grenna inclined her head. "You are welcome." She stopped buying his roses after that. Instead, she visited his garden. At first, she came only once every few days in the evenings after her work at the smithy. She would walk between the rows while Owen worked, and sometimes they would talk. Small things. The weather. The village news. Nothing consequential, but over time the conversations deepened. He told her about his childhood in Thornwatch, about his parents who had both died of fever when he was 16, about joining the army because he had nothing else, about the friends he had made and lost over 10 years of service, about the last battle, the one that ended everything. She told him about growing up in the southern settlements, about leaving because she wanted to see something different, about the prejudice she had faced, sometimes open, sometimes hidden, about choosing a trade that let her work with her hands because words had always been slippery things. Owen began teaching her about roses, how to prune them, how to watch for disease, how to mulch the roots before winter. Grenna learned quickly. Her hands, so accustomed to hammer and tongs, adapted to shears and trowels. One evening, as the sun set in shades of orange and pink, Owen said, "You were right, about the memorial being for the living." Grenna looked up from the bush she was pruning. "How so?" "I thought I was growing these for them, for Marcus and Eliza and all the others. But I was growing them for myself, so I would have a place to come every day and remember them, so I would not forget." "You would not forget." "I might. People do. The mind protects itself by letting go." He touched the petals of the nearest rose, gentle. "This way I have to remember. Every day I see their names. I tend something that needs tending. I keep them alive in the only way I can." Grenna set down her shears. "It is a hard thing to carry grief like that." "Yes." Owen met her gaze. "But it is better than pretending it does not exist." They stood together in the dimming light, surrounded by red blooms, and Grenna felt something in her chest shift. It was not attraction, not exactly, though she was beginning to find the scarred planes of his face appealing. It was something deeper. Recognition. The sense that here was someone who understood what it meant to carry weight, and who chose to carry it anyway. She fell first. She knew it the night she realized she was hurrying through her work at the smithy so she could get to his garden sooner. She knew it when she started thinking about his hands, the careful way they moved through the thorns. She knew it when she lay in bed and thought about the sound of his voice, low and steady, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. She did not tell him. Thornwatch was a small village, and people already whispered about the orc woman who spent her evenings with the strange veteran. She did not know if he felt the same, and she would not risk the fragile friendship they had built on an uncertain hope. But she kept coming, and he kept letting her in. The trouble started in late autumn. The village council convened every season to discuss matters of importance: expansion plans, defense needs, resource allocation. This season, they had decided that Thornwatch needed a larger training ground. The current one was too small for the number of recruits they hoped to train. They had identified the perfect location: Owen's land. He found out when the head counselor, a stern man named Rurik Dane, knocked on his door one evening. Grenna was in the garden, trimming dead leaves. She heard the conversation through the open window. "The council has voted," Rurik said. "We need your land for a drill yard. We are prepared to offer you fair compensation. My land is not for sale." "This is not a negotiation, Talmadge. Thornwatch needs this. You know that. We are a border village. Training is essential to our survival." "Then train on the existing grounds. They are too small. Build elsewhere." "There is nowhere else with the space and the flat ground." Rurik's voice hardened. "You are growing flowers, Talmadge, flowers. We need to train soldiers. These are not just flowers." "Then what are they?" Silence. Grenna held very still, listening. "They are none of your concern," Owen said finally. "They are the concern of this village. We have tolerated your eccentricity for 5 years, but enough is enough. You have 1 month to clear the land. After that, the council will do it for you." The door closed. Grenna heard Owen's footsteps, heavy and uneven. She set down her shears and went inside. He was standing by the table, his hands braced on the wood, his shoulders tight. He did not look at her when she entered. "You heard," he said. "Yes, they are going to destroy it, not if you fight." "How?" He turned to face her and his expression was raw. "They are right. This village needs training grounds. I am one man growing roses. What argument do I have? The truth. The truth will not save them. It might, Grenna said. If people knew what the roses meant, they might understand. Owen shook his head. I have never told anyone. Why would I start now? Because if you do not, you will lose them. I lost them 5 years ago. His voice broke on the last word. I lost them when I led them into that trap. These roses are just me pretending I can make it better, and I cannot. I could never make it better. Grenna crossed to him and took his hands. They were rough, scarred, shaking. You did not lead them into a trap on purpose. You did not want them to die. But they did. Yes, and you planted 43 roses so they would have something beautiful, so their names would not be forgotten. That matters. Not to the council. Then we make it matter. Owen looked at her, and something in his gaze shifted. Not hope, not yet, but something close. How? Grenna did not have an answer that night, but she began looking for one. She started by talking to Marta. The blacksmith listened to the whole story, her weathered face thoughtful, and then she nodded. The council is full of old warriors, Marta said. They respect strength. They respect sacrifice. If they knew what the roses really were, they might reconsider. Owen will not tell them. Then someone else has to. They will not listen to me. I am an orc. Marta snorted. Some will not, but some will. You are not the problem, Grenna. The problem is that Talmadge has spent 5 years hiding what those roses mean. If he had made it a proper memorial from the start, the council would never have targeted the land. He was grieving, and now he is losing what he built from that grief. Life is not fair. Marta tapped her fingers on the anvil. But there are people in this village who served with him. People who knew his company. If they spoke, the council would listen. Do you know who they are? I know some. I will make a list. Grenna took the list and began visiting people. It was awkward work. Many were wary of her, and some simply refused to talk, but a few listened. A veteran named Jonah, who had trained with Owen years ago. A woman named Sala, whose brother had been in his company. An older man named Tevin, who had fought in the same battles but survived. She told them about the roses, about the names, about what Owen had built. Some were moved. Some were indifferent, but slowly a few people began to understand. I did not know, Sala said, her eyes bright with tears. I thought he had just retreated into himself. I did not know he was doing this. He does not want people to know, Grenna said. But if the council destroys that garden, he will lose the only way he has to remember them. Then we have to stop the council. Will you speak at the next meeting? Sala hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I will. Grenna collected promises from 3 others. It was not many, but it might be enough. She told Owen what she was doing. He listened in silence, his face unreadable. You are wasting your time, he said when she finished. Maybe, but I am going to try. Why does this matter so much to you? Grenna looked at him, at the man who had led her into his garden and his grief. Because you matter to me, she said simply. Owen's expression cracked just a little. Grenna, I know you do not want people to know. I know this is hard. But if you let them take this without a fight, you will regret it. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused. Thank you. She squeezed his fingers. Do not thank me yet. We have not won. The council meeting was held in the largest building in Thornwatch, an old hall with a high ceiling and benches along the walls. The entire village could fit inside if they wanted, but most meetings drew only a few dozen people. This one drew more. Word had spread, as word always did in a small village. People came to see what would happen. The benches filled. The councillors sat at a long table at the front, Rurik Dane in the center. Owen sat in the front row, his face pale and set. Grenna stood near the back, her heart pounding. Rurik called the meeting to order. He outlined the proposal quickly. The village needed a larger training ground. Owen Talmadge's land was ideal. The council had voted to claim it for public use with compensation. "Does anyone have objections?" Rurik asked. Sala stood. "I do." Rurik frowned. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you are proposing to destroy a war memorial." A murmur ran through the hall. Rurik's frown deepened. "What memorial?" Sala looked at Owen. He sat frozen, staring at his hands. Grenna willed him to speak, but he did not. "The roses on Owen Talmadge's land are not just flowers," Sala said. "Each one is planted for a member of his company. The company that died 5 years ago in the battle at Riven Pass. 43 people. 43 roses. Their names are on stakes beside each bush." The murmur grew louder. Rurik held up a hand for silence. "Is this true?" he asked Owen. Owen did not answer. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the muscles stood out. Jonah stood. "It is true. I knew some of the people in that company. I did not realize what Talmadge was doing until Grenna Crag told me." Tevin stood next. "Those were good soldiers. If Talmadge has been honoring them all this time, we have no right to destroy that." Another veteran stood. Then another. Voices overlapped. The room was suddenly full of people who had known the dead, who remembered them, who had not realized that anyone was still tending their memory. Rurik held up both hands. "Quiet, please." The noise subsided. Rurik looked at Owen. "Talmadge, is this true?" Owen's hands were fists on his knees. He looked up and his eyes were bright and hard. "Yes." "Why did you not say so when we first approached you?" "Because it is private, because I did not want this to become a spectacle. A memorial is not private, it is for the community. This memorial is mine." Owen's voice rose. "I planted those roses because I could not save them. I tend them because I need to. I did not do it for the village, I did it for me." The hall was silent. Rurik studied him for a long moment. "That may be," Rurik said finally, "but those 43 people belong to Thornwatch. They fought for us. They died for us. If you have been honoring them, then this village owes you respect for that." He turned to the other counselors. They conferred in low voices. Grenna held her breath. Sala glanced back at her and gave a small nod. Rurik faced the hall again. "The council will delay the vote for 1 month. In that time, we will consider alternative locations for the training ground. If none are found, we will revisit this issue. But we will also discuss making Talmadge's garden an official village memorial, if he is willing." Owen did not move. Grenna could see the tension in every line of his body. "Talmadge," Rurik prompted. "I will consider it," Owen said, his voice tight. "Good enough. Meeting adjourned." The hall erupted into conversation. Grenna pushed through the crowd toward Owen, but he was already on his feet and heading for the door. She followed him outside, into the cool night air. He did not stop walking until he was out of the village center, until the noise of the hall had faded behind them. Then he stopped and turned to face her. "You should not have done that," he said. "I did what I thought was right. You told everyone, you made it public. I saved your garden. You took it from me." His voice was ragged. "Do you understand? That garden was the only place I could go and be alone with my grief. Now everyone knows. Now it will be a place where people come to pay respects, where they expect me to explain things, where it is no longer mine." Grenna felt something twist in her chest. "I am sorry. I thought it was the only way. You thought wrong." The words hung between them, sharp and cold. Owen turned away. "Do not come to the garden anymore. I need to think." He walked away, and Grenna stood alone in the dark, feeling as if she had broken something precious without meaning to. She did not go to his garden. She kept her distance. She worked at the smithy, went home, slept badly. Marta did not ask, but Grenna saw the sympathy in her eyes. A week passed. Then 2. Grenna heard through village gossip that the council had found an alternative site for the training ground. a flat stretch of land on the other side of the village, less convenient but workable. Owen's garden was safe, but she did not know if he was. She wanted to go to him. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to fix what she had broken, but he had asked her not to come, and she would respect that. Even if it hurt. Even if she lay awake at night thinking about the scarred planes of his face and the careful way he tended each rose. On the 17th day, Owen came to the smithy. Grenna was shaping a hinge when Marta called her name. She looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, outlined by the afternoon light. Her heart clenched. She set down her work and went to him. Marta, bless her, found an excuse to go into the back room. "Hello," Grenna said. "Hello." Owen looked tired, older. "Can we talk?" "Yes." They walked together, not speaking, until they reached his garden. The roses were still blooming, though the season was late and some had already started to fade. Owen led her between the rows to a bench she had never noticed before, tucked in a back corner. They sat. "I was angry," Owen said. "When you told everyone what the garden meant, I felt like you had taken something from me without asking. I know, I am sorry. Let me finish." He took a breath. "I was angry and I said things I should not have, but I have been thinking and I realized something. You did not take the garden from me, you saved it, and you did it because you care. I do care. I know." He looked at her and his gray eyes were soft. "I have spent 5 years keeping people away. I told myself it was because I needed to grieve alone, but the truth is I was afraid. Afraid that if I let anyone in, they would see how broken I was, how much I still blame myself. You are not broken. I am, but maybe that is all right." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. "You came into my garden and you watered my roses when I could not. You listened when I told you about my company. You fought for me when I would not fight for myself. I do not know what I did to deserve that, but I am grateful." Grenna's throat was tight. "You do not have to be grateful." "Yes, I do, because you gave me something I did not know I needed. You made me see that the memorial was not just for me, it was for them. And if making it public means other people can remember them too, then maybe that is a good thing." "Is it, though? Or did I just force you into something you did not want?" Owen smiled, a real smile this time. "A little of both, maybe. But I have decided to let the council make it official, a village memorial. I will still tend it, but I will add a plaque, something that explains who they were." "That is a good idea. It was your idea, really. You are the one who said memorials are for the living." He squeezed her hand. "I am sorry I pushed you away. I am sorry I hurt you. I forgive you." They sat together in silence, surrounded by red blooms and carved names, and the last of the daylight filtered through the petals like stained glass. "There is one more thing I want to do," Owen said after a while. "I want to plant a new rose, not for the dead, for someone living." Grenna's heart skipped. "Who?" He turned to look at her fully, and his gaze was open in a way she had never seen before. "You, if you will let me." "Why?" "Because you are important to me. Because I want you in my life, not just as someone who visits my garden, but as someone who belongs here, with me." He hesitated. "If that is something you want." Grenna felt warmth spread through her chest, bright and sudden. "Yes, that is something I want." Owen's smile widened. He stood and pulled her to her feet. Together they chose a spot at the edge of the garden, in full sun. He dug the hole while she prepared the bush, a young plant with buds just beginning to open. They planted it together, their hands working side by side in the soil. When it was done, Owen made a new stake. He carved her name into the wood with careful strokes. "Grenna Cragg." "There," he said, driving it into the ground. "Now you are part of the garden. I like that." They stood together, dirt on their hands, and Owen turned to her. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. "I am not easy to be with. I have scars inside and out. I will have bad days. Days when the grief is too heavy, I know. But I want to try with you." Grenna leaned into his touch. "Then we will try together." He kissed her, and it was soft and tentative, a beginning. She kissed him back and felt something inside her settle. "This," she thought. "This is where I belong." The weeks that followed were careful and sweet. Owen and Grenna navigated the early stages of their relationship with the same patience they brought to tending roses. They learned each other's rhythms. Her early mornings, his late nights, the way she liked her tea strong and bitter, the way he sometimes woke from nightmares and needed to walk among the roses in the dark. The village adjusted to the news that Owen's garden was an official memorial. The council had a plaque made, bronze and dignified, listing the names of the fallen. It was placed at the entrance to the garden. People began to visit, veterans who had known the dead, families of those who had served alongside them, children learning about the history of Thornwatch. Owen found it hard at first. He was not comfortable being seen as a caretaker of public grief. But Grenna stayed close, and slowly he learned to accept the attention. He even began to talk to visitors sometimes, telling stories about the people whose names were carved on the stakes. Small things. Marcus's terrible singing voice, Eliza's gift for strategy, Thomas's bad jokes. The roses became more than his private mourning. They became a place where the village remembered together. Winter came, and the roses went dormant. Owen mulched the roots carefully, protecting them from the cold. Grenna helped, bundling straw and laying it thick around each plant. They worked side by side, and sometimes they talked, and sometimes they were simply silent together. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Owen said, "I am glad you bought all my roses." Grenna looked up from the bush she was mulching. "You told me I was wasting my coin." "You were. But it brought you here, so maybe it was not a waste after all," she smiled. "Maybe not." They finished the work and went inside. Owen's cottage was warm, the fire burning steady. He had added a second chair to the table. Small changes, but they mattered. She had a place here now. That night, they sat together by the fire, and Owen told her about the future he was imagining. A spring wedding, maybe, if she wanted that. A life built here in this cottage, tending the garden together. Children, perhaps, someday, if they were blessed. Grenna listened and felt her heart swell. "Yes," she said, "I want that too. Even though I am still broken, you are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference." Owen reached for her hand. "With you, I think I can heal. With you, I think I already have." Spring came, as it always did. The snow melted. The ground softened. The roses began to bud, tiny green points pushing up through the mulch. Owen and Grenna were married on the first day of bloom. It was a small ceremony, held in the garden, surrounded by roses and carved names. Marta stood as witness. Sala and Jonah and a handful of others came to celebrate. The village priest, an old man named Corwin, spoke words about love and loss and the courage it took to build something new from grief. Grenna wore a simple dress, green as her skin and flowers in her hair. Owen wore his best shirt, the scar on his face stark in the sunlight. They spoke their vows standing beside the rose bush he had planted for her, the one that bore her name. "I promise to tend this life we are building," Owen said, "to be patient with your growth and gentle with your thorns, to water you when you are thirsty and shelter you when the storms come." Grenna felt tears prick her eyes. "I promise to stand beside you in the dark times and the light, to help you carry your grief and share your joy, to grow with you always." They kissed, and the small crowd applauded. It was not a grand wedding. There was no feast, no music, no dancing. But it was theirs, and it was enough. Afterward, they walked through the garden together. Grenna touched each stake, each name. Owen watched her with quiet eyes. "They would have liked you," he said. "You think so? I know so. Marcus would have made terrible jokes to try to make you laugh." Eliza would have challenged you to an arm wrestling match. Thomas would have asked you to forge him a new sword. Grenna smiled. I would have liked them too. Yes. Owen put his arm around her. I think you would have. They stood together, surrounded by red blooms and the memory of the dead, and looked toward the future. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Owen continued to tend the memorial, and Grenna helped. They added a stone path between the rows so visitors would not damage the roots. They planted a few additional bushes at the edges, not for the dead, but simply because they were beautiful. The garden expanded slowly, organically, becoming something more than just a monument. Grenna left her job at the smithy and began working with Owen full-time. She learned everything he knew about roses, and then she learned more, reading books and talking to other gardeners. She discovered she had a gift for it. Under her care, the roses flourished. They had children eventually. A daughter first, born in late autumn. They named her Violet, for the flowers that bloomed in the shade at the edge of the garden. She was strong and curious, with her mother's green skin and her father's gray eyes. Owen cried when he held her for the first time, overwhelmed by the fragility and the hope. A second daughter came 3 years later. They named her Kira. She was quieter than Violet, more thoughtful but no less loved. The girls grew up among the roses. They learned the names on the stakes, learned the stories of the people who had died. They learned to prune and water and mulch. They learned that love and grief could exist together, that one did not erase the other. Owen's nightmares grew less frequent as the years passed. He still had hard days when the weight of memory was too much, but Grenna was there. She held him when he needed holding. She gave him space when he needed space. She reminded him, gently, that he was allowed to be happy, and he was happy. Not in the uncomplicated way of someone who had never known loss, but in the deep, enduring way of someone who had survived the dark and found light on the other side. One spring morning, when Violet was 12 and Kira was 9, Owen stood in the garden with Grenna and watched his daughters playing among the roses. Violet was teaching Kira how to braid flower crowns, her small hands quick and sure. Kira was giggling, her laughter bright as birdsong. I never thought I would have this, Owen said quietly. Grenna leaned into him. What? This? A family, a future. I thought the war had taken that from me. The war took a lot, but it did not take everything. No. Owen kissed the top of her head. It did not. They stood together, and the roses bloomed around them, red as blood and bright as hope. The names on the stakes remained, carved and permanent, but they were not the only story the garden told anymore. Now it told a story of survival, of healing, of a man who had grown beauty from grief, and a woman who had loved him enough to help him see it. Violet looked up from her flower crown and waved. Papa, Mama, come see. Owen and Grenna crossed the garden to their daughters. Violet had made a crown of red roses and white daisies, and she placed it carefully on Kira's head. Kira beamed, her tusks just visible in her smile. It is beautiful, Grenna said. Just like you, Mama, Violet replied. Owen laughed, a sound that came easier now than it once had. He scooped Kira into his arms and spun her around, and she shrieked with delight. Violet grabbed Grenna's hand and tugged her toward the bench, chattering about the bees she had seen that morning. The sun climbed higher. The day unfolded in small, ordinary moments. And in the garden where 43 roses grew for the dead, a family lived and loved and tended the future. Years later, when Owen was old and gray and his hands shook too much to prune, he would sit on that bench and watch Grenna work. She was still strong, still steady, her green skin weathered but her eyes as bright as ever. Violet and Kira had families of their own by then, and their children sometimes came to help in the garden, learning the names and the stories just as their mothers had. One evening, as the light turned golden, Grenna sat beside Owen on the bench. They were alone for once, the garden quiet around them. "Do you remember when we met?" Grenna asked. "You bought all my roses." "I did." "I thought you were mad." Grenna laughed. "I was a little. But I needed to know why you grew them. And now you know. Now I know." She took his hand, threaded her fingers through his. "I am glad I asked. So am I." They sat in silence, watching the roses sway in the breeze. Each bush was healthy, each name still legible. The memorial had endured, and so had they. "I love you," Owen said. "I love you too." The sun set. The stars came out. And in the garden where a man had once grown roses to remember the dead, two people sat together and celebrated the life they had built from loss and love, and the quiet courage to keep growing.